Hello and welcome! Today we're going to be talking about some of my favorites from the Nintendo Entertainment System. This console is of course chocked to the brim with some heavy-hitting classics, some of which are in the category of best of all time for some gamers. The easy example of course being Super Mario Bros. 3. While I do love me some SMB3, some Castlevania, some Legend of Zelda and more, this is the console that I grew up on, and the nostalgia factor is high. And for that reason, I'm not going to be covering these incredibly prolific games that are heralded as the best of all time. No, rather, I'm going to pick the ones that I can share a little bit of fond memories of growing up and that I truly just love and go back to. Plus, stay tuned at the end because I can promise you there's going to be a truly unique game at the end that you've not seen on any other list. So without further ado, let's jump in and talk about some of my favorite games from the Nintendo Entertainment System. Okay, real quick before we dive into the games, let's have an overview of the console that powers them. Released in 1983 in North America, the Nintendo Entertainment System came out with a $179 sticker price. It would go on to sell 34 million units in North America and roughly 62 million worldwide, rejuvenating the appetite for the video game industry as it followed the infamous video game crash of 1983. While Japan got the Famicom, a playoff of Family Computer, the NTSC market got the beautiful gray toaster that is the NES, complete with a hinge door and side-loading cartridge slot, which in itself is infamous for working inconsistently, or not at all over time. In 1993 of October, however, the North American market would get a redesigned model codenamed the NES 101. This updated version includes a much improved top-loading mechanism, eliminating the side-loading altogether. Also removed was the 10 NES authentication chip, allowing unlicensed and other region games to be played on the system. Unfortunately though, those cuts also included the removal of the RCA composite video output, which means that you're going to be stuck with RF unless you mod your console. Strangely, they also removed the LED power indicator for some reason as well. Today though, I'm actually playing on the Retro USB's AVS, a great FPGA-driven console that simulates the original NES hardware and adds quality of life improvements like 720p output via HDMI. While it falls a tad short of Analog NT Mini's 1080p output, I've become a huge fan of the AVS and I can't recommend it enough, especially with the much nicer price tag. Enough about the hardware though, we're here to talk about games. So here's 10 of my favorite NES games. First up, we have Jackie Chan's Action Kung Fu. This is one of those games that I missed out on during my childhood, which means nostalgia isn't playing a big role in my enjoyment. And there's plenty of enjoyment to be had. Released at the end of 1990 from Hudson, this would-be generic action platformer sports none other than Jackie Chan's likeness. All of that doesn't matter in the slightest because this game truly rocks. I discovered this much later in life off a recommendation, so I'm glad I got it. The control of, presumably Jackie Chan, feels unique. It's not quite floaty, but not quite tight either. But once you've got the hang of it, it's off to the races. Like many classic action platformers, you collect power-ups and orbs. Power-ups provide access to special attacks, and collecting 30 orbs will refill your life. The game plays out over 5 or so levels as you attempt to rescue your kidnapped sister and concludes with a boss fight of varying difficulty. Speaking of difficulty, the game starts off smooth for accessibility and ramps mostly appropriately as it goes on. While there's no infinite continues, it does retain that one more try feel if you die. The unique levels, boss fights, and cool power-ups, all while listening to a catchy tune, makes this a great game to keep coming back to. Alright, next up on this list is Panic Restaurant. If you know anything about collecting for the NES, you know that some of these games aren't cheap. In fact, a few are dumb expensive. Oftentimes it's being less about how good they are and more about pure rarity. I'm looking at you, Jetsons and Jimmy Connors Tennis. Panic Restaurant falls into this expensive category, unfortunately, fetching close to $1,000 at the time of making this video. Panic Restaurant, having been released after the Super Nintendo, flew under a lot of people's radars. Fortunately, it's more than just rare. This quirky platformer has you controlling a chef armed with a frying pan, going through 6 strange food-related levels, battling some pretty interesting enemies. What makes Panic Restaurant so much fun is it's managed to find that perfect balance of fun, difficulty, and just overall smoothness. There's a lot of charm in this one, and later has become more of a cult hit. I only wish it were more approachable given the price, but hey, there's other ways to play games beyond physical, and I recommend that you check this one out if you can. Okay, next up is G.I. Joe, a real American hero. If you grew up in the 80s or early 90s, you were likely inundated with G.I. Joe. Whether it be the awesome and campy animated TV show, the action figures, or the video games, you were exposed to G.I. Joe, and for me, it was absolutely all three. Of course, the NES had G.I. Joe video games, 2 in fact, but we're talking about the real thing here, a real American hero. You start out by selecting your team, balancing for the level design and challenges, and then you're off to infiltrate a Cobra base, plant some bombs, and take down a boss to close out each level. In each level, there's plenty of pickups to be nabbed like stronger bullet power, temporary invincibility, and even health refreshers, and you'll need them. This game is hard. While these power-ups will help, often the biggest challenge is time, or rather the lack thereof. The level design leaves a bit to be desired when the seconds are ticking off the clock, but while you're trekking around and hunting for placement spots, you'll be jamming out to some great tracks. If you're in the mood for a challenging but rewarding run and gun with some cool mechanics, I would recommend this excellent title from the deep NES library. Alright, this list is heating up with Mike Tyson's Punch-Out! This is a port of a rather silly 2-monitor arcade game that came to our beloved NES with a punch, if you'll pardon the pun. You're the aptly named Little Mac, an underdog boxer who is about to take on some rather interesting opponents as you work your way through to the championship bout. In true Nintendo form, the colorful and unique fighters make this game what it is. Learning each boxer's style and moves until you finally get that KO feels so satisfying. We all have some useless memories from our childhood that will be with us forever. Maybe it's your first grade teacher's dog's name, the plot to the first book you ever finished by yourself, a joke's punchline to a setup maybe you long forgot. And for whatever reason, my brain seems intent on taking each boxer's pattern in Mike Tyson's Punch-Out to the grave. Not that I'm complaining, it's a great time to pop in this classic and start slugging away. I'm sure most have played this one already, but in the off chance that you've not, it's definitely worth checking out. They did end up rebranding this as a non-Mike Tyson version a few years later, simply called Punch-Out, and it features Mr. Dream instead of Tyson at the end, but the rest of it is the same. This game rocks. Okay, next up on this list is Tecmo Super Bowl. Alright, before you start roasting me for adding a sports title to the list, remember that this was before either the Madden and 2K series even began. And that's a good thing, because Tecmo Super Bowl is untainted by the sports simulations that would soon follow, and is a great arcade experience of football from the comfort of your own couch. Unlike most games in this list that feature some of the best 8-bit music out there or some super unique gameplay, this is just football. But something keeps drawing me back to it. So many good memories playing with family and friends as we duked it out for nothing but bragging rights. Tecmo Super Bowl features a snapshot in time of what the NFL looked like in 1990 or 91, featuring those teams and players. If you're on the offense, you get a massive playbook of 8 plays to choose from, and when you're on the defense, you get a massive playbook of, well, the same 8 plays, which you're trying to pick the same as what the offense player picked in the hopes of a sack or an interception. Does that sound simple? Well, it is, but that's part of what makes Tecmo Super Bowl great. You didn't have to break down the complex intricacies of football strategy to your grandma so she'll play with you, just pick one of the 8 and go. Incredibly fun, and given the arcade-like experience, this game still holds up well today for some of the best head-to-head couch battles. Okay, where are my RPG fans? Next up is Dragon Warrior. Today you know this series as Dragon Quest, but back then it was Dragon Warrior. Well, at least in the US it was. There's some great RPGs on the NES like the original Final Fantasy, Gemfire, Ultima, and more, but my favorite of the genre on this console is Dragon Warrior. It just drips of classic RPG, and so the entry bar here to jump in is low. The story, like most of these early RPGs, is a bit simple and generic, but the character progression, upgrading equipment, and exploring dungeons, that was the big draw first and foremost. Like the rest of the installments in this great RPG series, the light and colorful enemies are here, such as the iconic Dragon Quest slime. Also, as you adventure to save the princess from the evil Dragon Lord, will be other series staples like the combat-ending fanfare and level-up sounds. Overall, this game isn't super long, especially when today's RPG genre is associated with really lengthy completion times, but that doesn't detract from the overall enjoyable experience. Plus, if you didn't get enough Dragon Warrior, the following 2 releases in the series share the same storyline, so you can just keep on going. Recently, this was re-released along with Dragon Warrior 2 and 3 as part of a compilation on the Switch, and I highly recommend you check it out if you've missed out on these classics. Alright, next up is Adventure Island 3. I never played the arcade version, and I only played the first and second Adventure Island much later, so there's no mystery here as to why I'm choosing this version, but dang do I love this game. Like others in this series, you're a caveman and you need to reach the end of the stage before you die of apparent starvation, but your metabolism is way out of control. You're armed with a hatchet or an axe, and you're moving ever forward to take on all sorts of prehistoric enemies, trying to prevent your goal. Speaking of prehistoric, one of the best things about this game is the ability to collect dinosaurs that you ride, and they help you with some sort of special ability. There's 4 unique dino upgrades that can be collected, all of which are super helpful for a specific context, but go down as easily as you get them. One hit and they're gone. Beyond the dinos, you can upgrade with a boomerang or a skateboard. Yeah, a skateboard. Listen, everything in the 90s was skating or surfing. While this is cool, it is definitely a trap. It moves way too fast and is often the cause of demise. Just avoid it. Between levels, you can bank or retrieve upgrades, including dinos, and plan with a bit of strategy as you move throughout the game. You'll likely need some of that strategy as well because, in true to an arcade origin, this game gets tough. Great music though, fun challenges, and dinosaurs. What else do you need? Alright, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, the arcade game. There's some great beat-em-ups on the NES, and it's no wonder why. They're a ton of fun. While you could easily point to classics like River City Ransom or Mighty Final Fight, my favorite is TMNT 2. Like Pokemon of today, you couldn't escape an era without learning about the turtles. They were everywhere, and technically still around, so of course they showed up on the NES. While the first game in the series is its own action platformer game, this game and its sequel TMNT 3, The Manhattan Project, are great beat-em-ups. I didn't have any siblings and it was just my mom and I growing up, so when I got a chance to team up co-op style with family or friends, this was the go-to game. All the best characters from the source material are here, and it makes the game feel right out of the cartoon show. As with most co-op games, you get the metagame of who gets the constrained power-ups, or pizza slices in this case, and the inevitable, oops, I didn't mean to get that. If you're a fan of the show, the comics, or what have you, there's plenty of enjoyment to find as you battle your way through the canonical universe. Not surprisingly, the game peaks with a final showdown of Shredder, and what a battle it is. Cowabunga! Alright, time for some Blue Bomber, Mega Man 5. I know, how can I skip over fan favorite Mega Man 2 for 5? Look, there's 6 great Mega Man games on the NES, and despite the completely amazing game and soundtrack from 2, if I had to be honest, Mega Man 5 is my favorite of the ones on the NES. Sliding, charge shot, and beat, Mega Man 5 has all the resources for a great run and gunner. While some of the Robot Master names get a bit silly by the 5th installment, the mechanics and the power-ups themselves are spot on, and the result is a really polished showing in the series. Since we're already in Subjective Land, some of my personal favorites from this is Starman, with the added bonus power-up of the Super Arrow, which for those Mega Man 2 fans should look somewhat familiar. Another really fun level that I enjoy is Gravity Man, in that it introduces these gravity changes, making for some excellent level design and intriguing platforming. Speaking of those levels, each Robot Master level has a letter, sometimes hidden, and if you collect them all it spells Mega Man 5. Doing so unlocks Beat, a Robo-Bird that makes their debut. Beat is used like a weapon upgrade and swoops down to attack. While completely optional, it does make the final Wily fight much easier. Plus, who doesn't love this adorable little blue bird? Lastly, not to upset the nerdum by claiming that FIME has the best music, but it's suffice to say that it does have a very strong entry in a series known for its banging music tracks. Alright, so what's the favorite game of all time on the NES for me? Well, that's Chip 'n Dale's Rescue Rangers. I get that it might not be everyone's number one pick on such an iconic console, but this is truly my favorite NES game, and I have tons of memories as a kid with it, feeling so proud when I finally completed it. As another action platformer, Rescue Rangers starts by picking either Dale or Chip before throwing you into a game that's overflowing with charm. Your goal is to take down Fat Cat, of course, but you're going to need to go through varying path of levels to get to your chance first. Each level features some unique component that usually ends with a boss at the end. The main way to traverse safely is to pick up items and chuck them at enemies to make them fly. You can also hide in some of those items that you picked up like boxes, but you have to be careful. Once the enemy dies, you lose your cover as well. The game isn't overly difficult, which isn't all that surprising given that it's a Rescue Rangers game, but it is incredibly fun and lighthearted. After completing a level, you drive the Ranger plane to the next level and make some choices along the way in how you get to the end. While you can only control Chip or Dale, Monterey Jack shows up to let you in certain places, and Zipper X as a temporary invulnerability power-up while killing some of the enemies on screen. They did end up releasing a sequel, Chip 'n Dale Rescue Rangers 2, but it failed to capture the same magic that the original one did, at least for me. I recognize nostalgia is driving this selection at the number one slot for me, but it's the one that I continually go back to, and with good reason. This game is amazing. Alright, and as a bonus to this list of favorites, one super unique game that I promise won't show up on anyone else's list is Tyler's Quest. This is a homebrew project that I actually completed over the course of a year in roughly 2018. My day job is software engineering, so when I started out, this was just a pet project to really experience the NES as a game developer. I started to enjoy the time and process, resulting in a complete game, albeit a bit on the short side. At the conclusion of the year spent, I wrote thousands of lines of assembly code. I created the digital art and made all the music. The finished game consists of 2 full levels, complete with a boss at the end of each. It's not going to win any awards, of course, but it's truly a favorite of mine because of the long and very rewarding experience that went into making it. And there you have it, my favorites from the Nintendo Entertainment System. Hopefully you enjoyed that list. I know I probably missed some of the great ones. After all, there are nearly 700 licensed games, of course. But I know you've seen something truly unique that you haven't seen before, and hopefully you found that interesting. And let me know what ones are your favorites. Until next time, thank you for watching.